Thanks for attending my talk. Second to last talk, still a good crowd. So, is this like everyone's woken up now from the hungover this morning? Finally? Yeah, my head's a little clearer too, so it's good. So this is my talk, Dancing with Dalvik. Who in here has decompiled an Android APK before? Awesome. Everyone else is going to be really confused. So, so this talk is the what to do after you've decompiled an APK, and let's start getting it to do what we want it to do, not what those silly developers want to do with it. So again, here's a little bit about me, security consultant with Citadel. There's my Twitter handle if you want to follow me. Sometimes I say stuff. Hold the OSCP, GPen, OSWP, the OffSec certs. GooFile and Pwnberry Pi were mentioned. I'm also a bug hunter in my spare time. I have 23 published vulnerabilities, a whole bunch of CVEs, Linux kernel bugs, open source bugs, just whatever I could find. Before, I presented different talks at GerCon and DerbyCon, and I really love tearing apart Android. So here's what we're going to go over. I'm going to talk about what Dalvik is, opcode primer, how to read the small a codes, and then I'm going to go and talk about a couple case studies, putting this into use against these APKs. So, intro. First thing, what is Dalvik? Well, it's a town in Iceland. And that's, on the technical side of things, it's also a lightweight stack-based VM that runs on the Android platform. So it's a lightweight VM that's utilized for low RAM CPUs, so mobile phones. And it's how Android applications are run on the phone. So instead of using a Java VM to run the executables, they developed their own virtual machine to handle these applications. Android apps traditionally written in Java. They can be written in C++ and compiled using the NDK, but the SDK that wraps into Eclipse is Java-based. So once the Java is compiled, it goes into Java bytecode, then compiled again into the Dalvik bytecode, the .dex files. So it goes from a .class to a .dex. Here's a picture showing the difference. So if you were doing just Java, compiler, Java bytecode, and then it runs in the JVM. When you compile for Android, same thing, Java source code, Java bytecode, then it goes into the Dalvik bytecode, and then it executes the Dalvik executable on the mobile phone. That's also how Android gets the separation of processes. Everything's in its own little silo. Keep everything separate. It's all based off Dalvik. So all the memory is contained within there and all that fun stuff. So the first thing we got to do is take apart these APKs, right? So you download something off the Play Store. What are you going to do with it? What's this developer doing? Is it, do I want to play with it? Do I want to do a security assessment on this? If you're doing those sorts of things. Bunch of tools. The number one people use APK tool or backsmally. And when these tools are run, it breaks apart the APK. APKs are essentially a zip that's signed. So it opens up the APK, extracts the DEX file, decompiles the DEX file into the small e files, and then you're left with these really scary looking things if you didn't know what it was. So here's just an example of running APK tool. I figure I should throw that in there for anyone who hasn't run it before. So APK tool D, and then Ghost Meter, which is the APK that I was doing this on, runs through backsmall, it's decompiling, loads the resource tables, all the other fun stuff, the framework files, and then it turns them into smallies. So here are some of the files that are in the APK once it's decompiled. We start with the Android manifest, which is how defines permissions and what activities or content providers are part of the application. It tells the system what's in it and what it's expected to do. And then below that is, these are what the smally, this we end up getting. So you end up getting a whole bunch of .smally files, and what do I do with those? So after you've done something with an APK, you change the code, and you want to put it back into an APK, APK2 also gives you that functionality as well. So the difference here is APK tool B for build, and then the directory that houses all the smally files, and then the output APK. So as you see when it runs, checks the sources, actually compiles them, Smallian, which is, I think it's Icelandic for assembly. So back small-a is disassembly, and small-a is assembly. Checks whether anything has changed, builds the APK. Now, on Android, after you've built the APK, you have to sign it using jar signer. Otherwise, Android won't install it. It will fail. So every APK is signed. It doesn't have to be a valid cert. Just has to be a cert to go. So, all right. So now let's start talking about Dalvik, the fun stuff, right? As I mentioned, you get a whole bunch of small-a files when this is decompiled. It's not as scary as x86 assembler. It's a little more readable than Java bytecode when that's disassembled, from my experience. ASCII representation of Dalvik opcodes. So if you just looked at the dex file in hex, there's a direct correlation between the hex values to the ASCII that they're putting in here. And it mostly corresponds to original Java files. You see that in the top of them. So here's a hello world example from the small-a Google code page. So it defines the class. That's a comment example. And I'm going to go through these and kind of explain what this is actually doing here to implement the hello world. So the first thing, variables, right? Every code has variables. Every program has variables and how you handle everything that you need to handle. So in the small-a files, you'll see two types of variables listed, registers and parameters. So registers are always V0, V1, V, etc. I've seen it up to like V200 sometimes in programs. So I'm not sure what the limit is for the number of variables. The variables are defined in the original Java code, so that's where they come from. Parameters are obviously passed to a function. So when a method is defined, it will define its parameters, and then within the code, P0, first parameter, P1, second parameter, and so forth. And both are defined at the beginning of the method. So here's the method for the hello world. It's defining, there's two registers, which are the variables, and you'll see them used V0 and V1. I'm going way too fast. So some types. You will see on here, if we go back, there's that V right there. So it's declaring what type this method is. V for void, Z is Boolean, B is a byte, et cetera, et cetera. So when you see function calls and functions being invoked, then you also see its type at the end of it. And it's good to keep in mind if you're messing with variables to make sure you give it what it's looking for, and you're not giving it, an int when it's looking for a string, because it just does not like that at all. Assigning variables. We'll start with const. In const string, there's const wide. You'll see the examples here. So const v0, 0x1, so it's all in hex. So that will define the value of 1 to the variable v0. If we were doing a string, const dash string v1, and then the string after a comma. In the hello world, you'll see that v1 is assigned hello world. Calling methods. Whenever you see invoke, that means it's calling another method. The first part of it will be whatever parameters within brackets, and then the method to call. You'll see invoke static for invoking a static method, and then you'll see invoke virtual for invoking a virtual method. And here's the example. It's calling, so invoke virtual, we're passing it to two parameters, the v0 and the v1, and the v1 is hello world. Then it's calling Java IO print stream print line. And then that function takes that parameter. So v1 and v0 is being thrown into that string. So it's just calling print line to print out. You.
So the difference between static and virtual is static like a locally defined function, but virtual is the
I haven't gotten that far in, yeah. When I'm looking at it, I'll see both mixed in. I'm gonna look at the source code. Like you can define a static, in Java there's a static function or a static variable. So that's the only thing that been able to notice. Yeah, I haven't gotten that deep into it because when I'm breaking stuff, just make sure it's called, right? So if statements, very important. There's always conditions. You won't find loops. There's no like for or while. You'll just see interesting if statements to accomplish the same thing once the code is decompiled. Some of the examples here, if EQ, VX, VY, and then the target it'll jump to. So you'll always see the if statement, what's being compared, and then the target that it's jumping to in the code. So if EQ is if it's equal, then you'll see if NES, if it's a non-zero, EQZ, if it's a 0, and then greater than, less than, there's like 20 of them when you go down the line. The targets are defined as cond underscore and then a number. So you'll see cond 0, cond 1, depending upon how large the function is and how many if statements it's being called or loops. I've seen up to like cond 20 in one method. So here's an example I pulled from some source code. And if you're looking at it, so it's calling this virtual, and then it's moving that result into V0. And then it's performing, if it's a non-zero, jump. So if this code is a 1, then it jumps to condition 0, sets it back to 0, and it loops to a go-to, whatever that is. So when you're looking through the small a code, this is what you'll see after any mob result or soon any more arithmetic. There'll be like an if statement where it goes to jump. All right. I am going way too fast. Right, it would go over the if statement, and then I moved the con 0 to be underneath it, for the example. That lives somewhere else in the code.
Yeah, well, I was saying, like, okay, so you have something in between that if and the line under it would be the same place.
Yeah. Yeah, so when it decompiles, it moves everything into the right spot. So you'll see the conditions that it'll jump to in various different spots of the code so it doesn't hit it going through.
The layout would be so I'm saying for this snippet, you cut something out between the S statement and line 100 label, right?
Yes.
But
Yes, I did. So I forget what APK I took this from, but I just wanted to show the if and then what a condition looks like. So you'll see colon and then cond underscore 0 or something there. All right, case studies. So ads suck, right? Playing a game, taking up real estate, or you're going through different things, and it's just sitting there, right? So I wanted to find a way to remove the ads from some of my common files, apps I have on my phone, right? Take up real estate. And also my 3-year-old wants to play Angry Birds. You know, he doesn't have the motor control to really not hit the ad all the time. Look, Daddy, look at this. Can we download this or go with this? You know, who knows where he's been to before he shows me my phone with what those ads are showing. You know, also stuff installed, you know, wants me to buy something and scary stuff. So I wanted to remove the ads for my own peace of mind, and so I can feel safer with my kid not like getting malware on my phone while he's playing a game, because who knows where these things are. So game I like to play is Solitaire. And the app that I had, they were called in between each new deal of the hand, right? So you would go through, you'd deal it, and it would show an ad, and sometimes it was just like a picture. Other times it was video and audio, had my phone vibrate and stuff. I'm like, what the hell is this, right? So it was definitely calling the ad in between the things. So how can I disable that? Airplane mode, right. Well, I like to get phone calls and stuff when I'm using my phone too, when I get emails. So airplane mode wasn't an option in these scenarios. I wanted to make sure my data was still getting through to me. So here is, does that look all right for you guys? So I'm calling, I just opened up the Solitaire, and now I'm just gonna do a deal so you can see the ad come up. See, how annoying is that? Like, I just had my hand, and now I have to skip or register now. And of course, register now is on top, right? So if you're just clicking. All right. Slideshow from So I was looking through the code and looking for anything that had the word add. All right, so that brought up way too many responses in my grunt. Because just 2 letters doesn't work out here. So then I started looking for display add, and I was looking in the main Smalley file for the Solitaire app. So in com mobilityware software solitaire.smalley, I found this function display add. It's like, all right. And then I saw that it was calling another function to actually display the ad. So the actual ad code lived somewhere else. This was just calling it whenever there was a deal. Well, that was easy. Just comment that damn thing out. Here, so now I have a video of what happens after I rebuilt that APK. I just want to show you, I do have network connectivity up there. Kind of hard to see, the little blue. I do have wireless, so I did not turn off the network connectivity to get this to go. Bring up, I was middle of hand, I was losing this one anyway, so I had to screw it. Random deal. As you see, no ads. So, this way wasn't mine, I'll do it again. No ads. System was none the wiser. The function, everything else, operated just fine on it. I just turned off the ads.
Have you seen any other applications where like wanting to see the ads you're getting?
Yes. The newer versions of Angry Birds, well, after I go over my next one, remind me in a minute. So, I had my own cert. So I just used jar signer and used my cert that I made, and it resigns it. Yeah, it's not looking for, Android doesn't look for the actual, like, true developer cert, right? It doesn't care that if I was MobilityWare or Rovio, like my cert said like dummy cert or something. As long as it is a signed APK and it's a cert that it likes to look at, then it just installs. So otherwise you get an error when you do the ADB push. It'll say invalid cert. It'll yell at you.
How do you handle updates? But if your cert is different from the original, it never does an update?
It'll still ask. It'll still ask, yeah. So I just don't do the updates. And then if I do the updates, I'll just re-break the APK when it goes in. So after the change is made, I recompile it, APK tool, I sign it, and then you have to uninstall the old one and then install your new Hacksword one to it'll get ads while you're playing solitaire. Okay, so the next one, chess game. Most apps display the ad during the entire program, right? So it's just sitting there at the top or out of the main part of the screen, the ad's just sitting there. And when network's disabled, you get no ad. So is there a way we can force this behavior in the program? Like, does the program check to see if it has network connectivity, or can we tell it has no network connectivity? So here's a screenshot of the chess game with the ads on top. So this just sits there and rolls through. These are the Google ones, so they're less annoying. Google actually provides an ad framework for developers to use in their APKs. And great, so if I break this once, now I know how to break it on almost every other APK or Android app that uses Google Ads. And like I said, how to make it look like there's no network connectivity. So I turned network off and then launched the logcat to see what was going on, see if an error message was thrown up. And then this error message came up. When it went to go to when the app started, ad request web view will know while trying to load the ad. Perfect. Now I know what I'm looking for in the APK after I decompiled it. So yep, I just grepped and I found this string. So com Google ads, and Google does obfuscate all their stuff, so the Smalley files don't say like this is the ad controller, it's just letters, which is quite annoying. But the strings weren't hidden. So there's the string that's called, that's thrown into the log right after it has no network connectivity. So let's look what it's doing here. It's grabbing this object right? So gets an object, so it gets like a variable or something sitting somewhere. And it's seeing if that variable is equal to 0. So if that variable is equal to 0, it goes down to con 0 and says add request web view was null while trying to load the ad, and then goes through its error handling routine and acts like, okay, I have no network connectivity, so I can no longer load the ad, right? It thinks it has no network connectivity. So let's just tell it has no network connectivity. So after the iGet, I know it's definitely an integer because it's doing it equals 0. So I forced const 0 to be equal to 0 at all times. And then after I recompile the APK, go through it, and now the screen real estate is a little bit bigger and the ad's gone throughout the entire game. So back to your other question. Angry Birds. The newer Angry Birds is actually really aggressive about this. And I can turn off the Google ad provider, but it'll then play its own ad. Just one static image in it the entire time.
Can you remove the link that it may allow access to, or is it just a static ad with no out?
It doesn't really go out, it's just in the app.
But it keeps you on compliant.
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't go to a store anywhere. And I was looking to see how to turn off just that view, because in other ways you can turn off the ads. You just make the ad be 0 pixels by 0 pixels, so it just doesn't show, even though the code's being called. That's not sitting in the layouts either. So Rovio is actually quite invested in making sure their ads are always in the game. But I guess when you make your money doing that, you invest the time to make it be a little more secure. Yeah. It breaks. It breaks, yeah. Because what happens when you remove the permission from the app, the writer didn't code to handle that exception, right? Because it thinks it will always have that permission. So when it goes and tries to make the call, the app crashes. That was the first thing I tried. So let me get rid of network permission. But no, it doesn't like that at all. Could do that, but that's a lot more work. I didn't want to have to man the middle of my phone all the time to get going. So, next thing, pinball wizard. Like playing pinball, but I don't like not getting a high score. How are these people getting these crazy high scores, right? So the values that are stored for the bumpers and the different targets that are hit during the game happen to be in the code. So let's right? So let's change that and then show everyone all of our elite pinball skills. So here's a typical game. Damn it, only 186,000? That's like nothing. It's hard to see? Ah, damn. Can we try turning off these lights again? You want to see the high one, yeah. I hit max int, man. It's awesome. No, still not good. It says target practice 9. Oh, there we go. Does that look a little better? So it says target practice 9, 186086. So 186,000 points after one game. This took a little while to look for in the code. Each table had its own like section in the code, and it had the scores in here. So I just was looking for anything that said score in the grep. So I found add score message and add score message, and it's taking 3 variables, and only one of those changed every time. So, well, 2 of them changed. But this one, when I converted the hex to decimal, was the value. So there's the value for whatever bumper that was, and there's another value there. So let's just change them all Fs. I tried putting like a lot of Fs, but then you hit max int way too fast, and then it just like rolls back over to 0. And then it messes up the scoring engine and everything, so I had to play with it to not go over max int while trying to hit the high score. And this game was also network-based, so you could like put your score up on the leaderboard. And someone found a way to change it to not taking an int, but taking like a wide. So they were getting, double my score on there. I was always like number 2, and I go back, and he was always back to being number 1 with the crazy high scores. Yeah, I mean, you could remove the call and put in a different call, or change the actual method, like go back to that method and change it. But when you start to get into that, there's more things to worry about and more chances that it starts breaking than just changing a value and causing a different condition to fire. Yeah, less is more. You want to do less changes to the code. So if you can't read this is only, I just like launch the ball, let it bounce around and sink. And 65, let's see, so 100 million, 654,311,360 after just the ball going around. So that worked out pretty well in my favor. I was like, hey, honey, go show my wife, hey, honey, look, I did awesome at pinball. And she's like, whatever. So she didn't really care too much for it. So what now? Well, hopefully you guys got a little intro to this and your heads were spinning about what you can do with some of the apps on your Android phones. And time to explore, right? Tear apart the APKs and start to look at what they're doing. It's very readable when you look at the code. That's not, once you look at what it's doing, it's not that scary. Yeah.
So, are the system libraries that come with Android also Dalvik?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Like, just getting the lab provider system library actually so that all apps and
That's doable, but there's 2 conditions for that. You need a rooted device, because you have to have an unlocked bootloader. Because those system files are read-only when the phone boots, so you have to modify them outside of the disk. So you have to use Clockwork Recovery Mod, create your own update zip, and then patch those files after you've recompiled it. But there's also signature protection on a lot of those, so the system won't fire because the signature doesn't match what everything else is looking for because it's not signed by Google. There is ways to do cert protection and signature checks on a lot of it, so we end up getting way more complicated to break the system than just modifying the APK to make it do what you want. Yeah.
So would you suggest that to protect your application, all of a sudden,
No. There's different. I mean, what are you trying to protect? Like.
somebody can my application, say malware, for instance,
So someone you developer put the APK up in the store to. Yeah, it's when it's this easy to decompile it, you can't. You just look for ways to mitigate that risk. So if someone takes your APK and injects malware into it, they're most likely not going to put it back up on the store. So it ends up going into the third-party pirate stores that are out there. They're huge in China, and that's where the malware lives, is in the third-party stores. There's no way to prevent that. Right. Yeah, Bouncer is running. It does do malware checks. I think it's all starting to look for like duplicate ones. So if you try and do that, it'll flag because it sees that app somewhere else very similar.
They have like it's like a unique ID for each entity. So it's like not only is it the signature, I think there's some issues with like apps have the same ID, and then you can pull stuff from somebody else's app because you say the user that ID of the app. How does that?
From the Play Store?
No.
Or on the phone?
On
Oh, yeah, because when Dalvik installs, each app is given its own user pretty much on the phone. That's how it controls the permissions. So one app can't just directly access, well, developers are really bad, they can, but one app can't just directly access another app's data. And that's how they protect against that. So each app has its own user ID on the device. It'll turn into Dalvik. Yeah, even though it starts as C, it'll still compile into a DEX format. So they uncompile the same way. A return object? If you want to return something here, let me pull up some code. Yeah. It's just like, it'll be like return string or return void. This Virtual 10 Studio is awesome. It is a GUI environment for doing everything. Let me and it has APK tool and jar signer, everything built into it. So you just like pull in the APK and then it decompiles it, makes everything neat, does a backup, and you can recompile and push back to your phone too. It's free. You don't have to have anything for this. Yep. It does. It does. So let me see a return type here. So there's a return void. So if the function's void, it'll return void. You'll always see a return at the end of it. And let me see if I can find a return one. Hang on. That one's void. That one looks like it's returning something crazy. Yeah, see there's a return object. So sometimes the variables will be objects, which is in a string or an int, like an image or something. You'll just see it as a return object there when it decompiles it. Yep. Yeah. Android's a fun platform to start messing around with stuff.
So are the drivers for the hardware also compiled in Dalvik?
That's all done on the Android system, yeah, because Dalvik runs on top of, like the Dalvik VM and Android runs on top of Linux, its own like thing. So those communicate back to the kernel. So your app will never talk to the kernel. Your app talks to Dalvik, which then talks to the kernel to get access to like the network card and SD card, stuff like that. It's all controlled that way.
When you push this stuff back to the device, do you have to give your dialog saying what permission select?
No, when you do an ADB push, it doesn't prompt you for anything. It just installs it on the, it's silent installation on the phone. Right, as long as it's signed. Yep. If you have root access to the phone, then you can look at those, yeah. Right.
So for the sign, you basically just install your insert to the trust order.
No, the cert does not have to be trusted. It just has to be a cert. So when I was doing some other work, looking at some other APKs for work, I was pulling them up, and in fact, the companies didn't even try to do a cert. You know, they just had like their company name as the CN, and everything else was blank. I was like, really? You couldn't just fill out and make it look like a real cert? You just have your company name and the CN, and that's it? And other ones like look real, you know. So it's interesting if you start to just you look at the cert, because you can do that. There's it's in the JDK, I think, how to read jar. It's not part of jar signer, but it might be something else like that, where it'll read the information of the cert that signs the APK, and you can pull out that information. It's kind of funny what companies name their stuff. So, you had your hand up again? This is the platform, right? This is just how it is. There is no mitigation between decompiling apps yet, right? They're not encrypted, they're not protected. They were looking at making encrypted apps, like ones that you pay for would be encrypted on the phone, so you couldn't pull it off, and they'd actually be split into two pieces. So you had to like do crazy mounting to pull off the information. And that was supposed to come out for Jelly Bean, like when it was 4.1, and it was scrapped at the last minute because it just wasn't working for developers. So